Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to Liam's Lyceum. I'm your host Liam, aka Himvar, as always. And it's been a hot minute since I've chatted with anyone, let alone an author, on this channel. But today I have with me a special, highly esteemed guest, Steve Diamond. We will talk about Steve a lot, I'm sure. But thanks, Steve, for coming on. It's
Hey,
nice
no
to have
problem.
you.
No problem. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, you were. I feel like not that exposed to BookTube um,
No,
much. Yeah.
no. I haven't really been on that many of the booktuber channels, oddly enough. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I think part of it is um, I'm generally pretty busy. I'm generally pretty busy, and
Mhm.
so it's hard for me to find time, especially during the week, just to sit down and chat with someone. A lot of the places they're like, yeah, let's meet at 1 p.m. on a Wednesday. Like, yes,
It's like,
trying to do that whole work thing. So that's been
yeah,
hard.
it's like,
Uh,
that's crazy. Yeah, 9 to 5. I guess that's normally a busy. No, it's good.
yeah, it is. It is. And so, I mean, I would like to be on more,
Uh-huh.
obviously. And so, but we'll get there. We'll get there
Yeah,
eventually. I'm
yeah.
not too worried about it.
I
But
mean, I remember you being on one of Christopher's live streams for this that Diamond edition, right?
correct.
Of Empire of Silence. But I think that's the only thing I recall. Besides, you do your podcast, of course,
Right.
which is a a nice online presence, I'd say. So.
Yeah. So that podcast is the Writer Dojo, and that's hosted by me and one of my good friends, Larry Correia, where we just give no nonsense writing advice. We kind of got sick of all of the writing advice podcasts telling everybody what they couldn't do. Um, it was less about like, hey, here's some really good advice, and here's how you tackle these difficult situations, and here's how you um, gosh, I mean, here's how you write action. Here's how you write horror, whatever.
Mhm.
And it turned, and so many of them have turned into, well, you're not allowed to write that because of X, Y, and Z. And that gets old real quick. Um,
Yeah, it
so,
does.
so yeah, about 2 years ago, we actually, what day is today? It might actually be almost exactly 2 years ago today. We started up the Writer Dojo. Um, No, the episodes are 30 to 45 minutes. They drop every Wednesday. And yeah, in fact, this last week was our 100th episode. Um,
Oh, nice.
so we do that. And then yeah, I mean, yeah, I was on Chris Rocchio's couple of his streams for his for the Diamond Edition of Empire Silence, which I'm the guy doing that. Spoiler, with my last name. Um, So yeah, so I'm doing that now too. Um, my hope is that eventually I can do a couple diamond editions a year from various authors, and that'll just become my job, the day job that kind of pays the bills until the writing actually catches up and starts giving me money.
Yeah, understand. Yeah. So yeah, that was about, I thought that was a clever idea when it was the Diamond Edition. I was like, that is
I didn't know he was going to do it.
Oh, really?
No, no, I didn't know. So we've been talking since last September, which I think is when you and I met for the first time.
Yeah, yeah. I remember you guys
Um,
went to dinner after one of the FanX days, and
yeah, it
so.
was the last day. He and I went to dinner. I mean, we've known each other kind of off and on for several years now, and then
Mhm.
I was at that show. I was in that booth, Bard's Tower, that doesn't exist anymore, and and then, yeah, and then I had a couple copies of um, a special edition I did for Larry Correia for Hard Magic,
Yeah.
and Chris looked over and saw it, and he was like, "Dude, this is rad. Who did this?" And I'm like, "Me." So so he came over and talked to me, and he's like, "Dude, let's talk about this because I'd really like to start doing something like that for my own series." I said, "Okay, sure." So yeah, so we went out to dinner that I think it was the last day of the con actually. We went out to dinner we just talked about it and stuff. And then, we just kind of kept in touch over the next few months. And then I got laid off towards the very tail end of last year. And so I shot him a message and I'm like, hey, I suddenly have a ton of time on my hands. Maybe we should talk about this more. So we did. And, we set it up. We got the rights and everything so that we're able to do it actually. And then, yeah. And it was, he a little bit before we actually announced it, he sent me this, like this, like hype video, the one that he played on the live stream. It comes up and it's like the diamond edition. I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat. I mean, yeah, I mean, they're, like limited edition, the diamond edition, like that's all cool. But it didn't click in my head that it was because of my last name, because apparently I'm stupid. So so then I'm like, yeah, dude, that's awesome. That looks really good. That's a cool hype video. And he's like, yeah, I just decided to say diamond edition because, because of your last name. I went, oh, huh. Well, I guess that's true, huh? I guess my last name is Diamond. That's crazy. The funny thing is, so I currently own and operate a company called Vault Books, and that's where I've done a bunch of limited editions from. And once I'm done with Larry's stuff, I'm shutting that down. For a bunch of various reasons that we don't need to talk about. But I kind of want to do my own thing with my own thoughts and my own design and all that stuff. And so I was trying to think up of a really good name for what that company would be called. And I for the life of me, I couldn't think of it. And so now Chris is like, Diamond Editions. And I'm like, oh, well, actually that's really good. I don't know why I didn't think of that before, but whatever. So yeah. So anyway, yeah, so I'm doing that. And I'm actually in talks with two other separate authors right now to try to do some limited editions of their stuff too.
That's awesome.
So, and then I'll talk to a third shortly thereafter. And two of those three are huge authors. And then one is traditionally published, but he also has a pretty large indie presence. And so he and I have been chatting kind of on the side. And so we'll see. It's looking like he and I are going to come to an arrangement. So
that's cool.
I can't say any of the names right now, obviously, because nothing's been signed yet. But no, so I'm excited. I've already laid out the Empire Silence and stuff, and we just got all the finalized artwork. So now I've got to put that in line, lay that all out and stuff. And so it's good. It's good. The artwork, we've only shown a few of the pieces from the campaign or in the campaign, and there's like 11 or something like that. And they are all awesome. So we're stoked. It's
awesome. Yeah. From the ones I've seen, they're pretty fire, I guess you could say.
As the kids say.
Yeah, as the kids say. Yeah, it's funny, names, they don't click sometimes. It's like if I had the last name Diamond, I probably wouldn't have realized for a second there either. So
I don't know, man. I mean, like titles and stuff like that and names, like I have the worst time thinking them up. And so, I mean, I guess it's not that surprising that I didn't know what to call the company, this new company that I'm doing. Gosh. But whatever. I mean, hey, I'm glad now. I mean, it's a cool name. So
worked out, right? Worked out. Yeah, I remember. When did that Kickstarter launch, actually?
I think it was like the very tail end of April.
That sounds right.
Like the 26th or 27th of April, something like that. And it's weird, right? Like you never quite know. A lot of there were a couple of his fans that were giving us grief for even taking it to Kickstarter or for anything, and we're like, guys, we didn't know, we didn't. I mean, so how it worked is we initially got rights to sell 500 copies.
Yeah.
The way special editions work is in most cases for traditionally published authors, the author does not have the rights to those books.
Mhm.
That's part of the contract is you sell those rights to said publisher. And that's what your contract is. And so then it's up to someone like me to go to the publisher and say, hey, I'd like to, basically purchase the right from you to do a special edition. Now, Chris was fortunate in that he happened to have the rights to the first 3 books in his series to do a special edition of, but only in the quantity of 500. And so, and we kind of figured, well, I mean, you never know. I mean, it was $100 a book. $100 is not insignificant. And if you bought the slipcase, it was an extra $50. Like, it's not an insignificant price. And so we figured we would go the whole, 30 days of the Kickstarter campaign, hyping up and making articles and stuff and putting in all this work, trying to get people to buy all 500 copies. So we launched the Kickstarter, and 15 minutes later, it was sold out. We were like, well, crap. So now what do we do? I mean, we have a whole month. Like, what are we supposed to do for a whole month? So we actually talked with DAW and the new company that came in and actually bought out DAW, and asked if we could have rights to another 500 copies of the first 3 books. And fortunately, they said yes. So then we basically relaunched with another 500 copies, and they also sold out that day. So, if we would have known that the interest was actually that high, we wouldn't have even gone to Kickstarter. We would have saved the 5% that they take off the top. I mean,
right. Yeah.
But what are you going to do? I mean, we didn't know. And so, but yeah, so by the time it ended, I think our Kickstarter raised close to $170,000.
Nice.
Now, I mean, we're not getting 170.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It turns out printing books on really expensive paper and, making these cool slipcases is hyper expensive. And so, but we'll each make enough money to, I don't know, well, Chris to pay off medical bills for having a kid. And then, me, I don't know, buy like 2.5 briskets because meat's expensive right now. So,
yeah, food is expensive in general.
But no, I'm excited. I'm super excited for it. We're a little bit behind on it just because art took a little bit longer than we wanted. But we've pretty much got all of the pieces now. We're just waiting on one little thing, and then we're pretty much good to go. And we'll be sending it to the printer here probably within the next couple weeks.
Nice. Yeah.
And it's not, we're not worried about the book printing. That's easy. And that only takes, that doesn't even take that long. It takes a couple, 2.5 months maybe to print. You always allow for extra time. What we're worried about is the timing on on constructing the slipcases, because you can't even do those until your book is finalized because of the size.
Yeah.
And so, and the place that we're having the slipcases made from, they do a great job, but it takes a minute. And so that's what we're worried about. We're worried about the construction of the slipcases pushing things out. But it's good. I mean, because of the attention that got, and because it looks so good, and in the previous books I've done, that's what's given me the opportunity to maybe do some more of this and to just do it professionally.
Yeah. Wow. That's cool.
So, and then, and then I got to do all the, that whole writing thing.
The writing thing.
So.
Which you do, of course.
I do. On occasion, I have written a few words. So.
A few, yes.
Yeah.
I have those behind us.
Yeah.
So some of it, I'm sure you've.
There.
got more. I got a couple. I mean, I have Residue right here.
Yeah, you have the OG
I've
Residue.
got Series
Yeah.
of War.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So, and then are those the only two like physical? No, wait. This new Arcadia just came out, didn't it?
Yeah, new Arcadia came out. So that's right there on the screen. Yeah, so new Arcadia is a series I'm writing with a guy named Mike Rothman. He's known in the indie realm primarily. He writes thrillers, like techno thrillers, very Michael Crichton type of stuff. And right at the beginning of this year, he shot me a text. He's like, "Hey, buddy," he's like, he read Residue, and one of the characters in Residue is this kind of a female. Well, she is definitely female, but she's a professional. You know, she's kind of a gun nut. She's a very cool character. And he read it, and he said, "You know, I really like how you wrote that character in Residue." And he said, I have a series of thrillers that I've written, and it's his Levi Yoder series, which are pretty cool. And he said that character has a daughter, and a lot of people have been asking me if I'll start writing novels with the daughter as the main character. He said, having read Residue, I really like how you portray that sort of character. He said, would you want to team up and write a series with her as the main character with me? I said, yeah, sure. Why not? Plus I was, unemployed. So it seemed like a good idea. So we planned it out, right towards the tail end of January, early February, something like that. We planned it out, and it was one book, and it's actually not this one.
Really?
It's a book called Operation Thrall, which comes out. When does that come out? I think it comes out Black Friday this year. Oh. And we talked it over, and we're like, yeah, this sounds like a great idea. And I started writing it. And then a few weeks later, he messages me, and he's like, hey, I've got a problem. And I was like, oh, crap, here we go. What's going on now? So he calls me up, and he says, he's like, so I've been writing this other book called New Arcadia. I said, yeah, I mean, I've seen the cover. And he said, it's not working. He's like, it doesn't have any longevity past a one book, like a one-off. And in the indie realm, you can't do that. You've got to have a series. That's the only way you're going to make money on your books as an independent author. And I said, oh yeah, I mean, that kind of sucks. Too bad for you. And he said, but he's like, I really like the character that I introduce in it, and I like some of the plot points. He said, but it just doesn't work. He said, but what if we turn it into an Alicia Yoder book, which is the main character of New Arcadia? Well, now New Arcadia and the forthcoming Operation Thrall. And I said, oh, okay. Like, what do you mean? Like, what do you want to do? So we kind of hashed it out and came up with a plot that night. And so basically, the way our co-authorship works for this series, well, so far, is he wrote the initial draft of New Arcadia. I wrote the initial draft of the sequel, Operation Thrall.
Okay.
And then the idea is we just kind of swap and go through edits. And so that's what this one is. So this became the new book one. Book two comes out later on this year. We're going to plot out book 3 and 4 in Vegas in November, because we're at a con together at 20 Books.
Okay.
And then and that one comes out in like February or March. The third one does. And then we don't have a release date for the fourth one yet. But so that's what that is. There's nothing supernatural in these books. There's nothing like that.
Darn.
I know. It was honestly, it's been hard. It's been a little hard to write them because of that. I'm just so used to writing stuff with, fantasy or horror or supernatural or whatever type stuff in it. So, but no, it's good. The first two books in the series, New Arcadia and then Operation Thrall, they kind of form a loose duology
Okay.
of sorts. And so the first book is a little bit shorter, and it's more of an introduction to the character, and it puts her in a spot to the main character to really start coming into her own, which happens in book two. And so but yeah, it's very our goal is to turn her into a repairman Jack type character, a fixer of sorts, just without the supernatural stuff.
Huh.
But yeah, so that's what it is. Very, very Michael Crichton meets F. Paul Wilson is kind of and that's the quote that Larry Correia
Oh.
gave us for it. So
Cool. Sounds cool. I'll
yeah,
have
so it's
to
good. So that's
check it out.
out, and then Servants of War obviously is out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the book I'm working on right now, is the sequel to that. And it's called Instruments of Violence, which is a
Nice.
cool title.
It is a cool title. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
And
And
then
so I'm working
Parasite,
on,
right?
and
That
then,
comes out next month, right?
yeah. And so I have Residue out, although that's getting re-released here
Huh.
in basically on Halloween.
Okay. Good
So
day.
the story is no different.
Okay.
But I got my rights back to it from the publisher, because that book's been with like 300 different publishers, it feels like now. And then so I went through, and I mean, that was my first book, and I didn't know what I didn't know at that point on how to
Right.
write. And I think a lot of authors, and you'll start seeing this when you start looking back at some of your own stuff too, man. But you look back at some of the earliest things that you write, and you start cringing a little bit. You're like, oh man, why did I write this like that? Or you look at it and you just go, that just sucks. I don't know why I wrote that. And so so what this did is this gave me an opportunity to kind of clean up a lot of that stuff. Clean it up, and I injected a few foreshadowing bits for what's going to happen in the sequel, Parasite, and the third book, Catalyst. And then, just added a bit more like weird and mad science into it, and supernaturally stuff. And the biggest change I made is I aged up the characters by 2 years.
Okay.
And that's it. Because in the original version of Residue, the one that's on the screen right there, they were 17. I initially wrote it to be a YA novel, but no one who was YA actually read it.
YA horror doesn't I can't think of anything else besides Residue, basically.
I mean, there's a few, right? I mean, Darren Shan is pretty much the main dude in that realm. But I found that the vast majority of people reading the book were just adults. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to age up the two characters. So I aged them up to 19. And it doesn't actually change anything in the book, really. There's a prom scene towards the latter chunk of the book that's hyper violent.
Yes.
Did you read it?
I read Residue. Actually, I have a review that came out recently on my channel.
Oh, sweet.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So, so then that the prom scene is very violent.
Very.
And in fact, that's what my buddy's quote is for it. He said it's the best prom scene since Carrie, which kind of tells you what you're getting. And so, so all I had to do was explain why the two main characters, Jack Bishop and then Alex, the chick, I have to explain why they're at a senior prom, and that's easy. So I did that, and that was really the biggest change, is I just aged up the characters. And the funny thing is, in book 2, in Parasite, it has zero effect. Like, it has zero effect. And so the re-release comes out on Halloween. Let me actually see something here. I'm
So
trying to see if
that re-release is going to be self-pub then, or
kind of, sort of. It's through Mike Rothman's
oh, okay.
publisher, if that means anything. It's effectively self-published.
Yeah, okay.
But let me see here. I'm just looking online on Amazon. Okay, yeah. So if you go to if you're on Amazon, you can actually see the new cover. It's
Oh, there's a
awesome.
new cover. Oh, look at this.
It's awesome. It's very 80s. It's very 80s horror, which is
Sweet.
awesome for me.
It's like your thing with like Christopher and like Star Wars kind of thing,
Oh yeah,
know?
yeah. Yeah. So like for the Diamond edition of Empire Silence, Chris was like, I need it to be like old
Oh,
EU
that looks awesome.
Star Wars, and I'm like, yeah, that's great. And then so for this one, this artist out of the Ukraine did a bang up job for the new cover for Residue, and it is very 80s horror. I mean, it just screams 80s horror, and so I'm stoked for it. Yeah, it's rad. And then of course the sequel to Parasite is or the sequel Parasite is also listed, and it's in the exact same vein.
Yeah, that looks good. That looks really good. I like that.
Yeah, and then the third one is being done right now, but it'll look very similar. That's the whole point. So yeah, so re-release of Residue, the author's edition or whatever, is Halloween, and then because if I can pick the release date for a supernatural thriller novel or horror novel, whatever you want to call it, I might as well pick Halloween, right?
Might as well.
And then Parasite comes out December 1st or 2nd, something like that.
Okay, cool.
And then the final book in the series, Catalyst, is slated for May 15th of next year.
Oh, sweet.
So yeah, so there's that.
You gotta take your characters to Auburn and put some Clark Ashton Smith crap in there.
Man, Auburn. I haven't thought about Auburn in forever. Oof. Yeah, I haven't been home in a long time.
So you grew up in that area, right? Like Eureka area or something like that?
I grew up in Sacramento.
Okay.
So in a suburb of Sacramento called Rancho Cordova.
Okay.
And so yeah, so I set the first book, Residue. I just set it up in a made up town north of there, kind of in the redwoods. There's actually there's kind of a plot reason for it in the book that people can see, but I just kind of wanted a small town that surrounded by woods and stuff, and in Northern California, the best place to do that is the redwoods. So but by the end of the book, things are super bad, and that town kind of sort of ceases to exist. And so so Parasite actually takes place in Sacramento. And then the third book will be kind of all over the place, but right around there in Northern California as well. So
cool.
But there's some major stuff that happens at the end of Parasite that will radically change what's going to happen in book 3. So you'll see. You'll see.
I will see. That I think I recommended it to you before, but Leiber's Our Lady of Darkness takes place in San Francisco.
Yeah,
and, it's pretty interesting. He's got Clark Ashton Smith as a character, kind of through like journal entries.
That's
so cool. It's pretty cool, honestly. So.
Yeah, I'll have to read that one. You've given me a couple recommendations that I just haven't had time to get around to yet. I need to read,
and that's fine. Yeah, everyone, if you weren't already aware, Steve has great taste in books, and so
I do think of myself as a guy who has pretty decent taste. But I mean, on the whole, I'm just happy when people read. I think that I think that there's a weird thing where they'll either only read one author or not at all anymore.
That does happen.
They're too busy watching TikTok or something stupid. So
yeah,
it's a bummer. And there's so many good authors out there, in all the different genres. And so when I recommend stuff, I try to recommend people who have been around for a long time, who do have extensive backlists. That way, if you pick it up and you like, okay, so if for anyone who's ever listened to the Writer Dojo podcast or who's heard me talk ever, I'm a big fan of a horror author named Robert McCammon. He's one of my favorite authors of all time. He might be my favorite author of all time. But it's easy to recommend him to people because the dude has like 20 something books out. And so you can start with him. And a lot of them are standalone because that was what horror authors did in the 80s and 90s. And so I like recommending authors like that who have like a really extensive backlist. So they can pick that guy up and start reading and go, oh, dang, this is awesome. Now what can I read? And then they see there's 38 different books to read. And so I like that sort of stuff. But, or gosh, who else? Like Matheson, I always recommend I Am Legend. I will recommend that till the day I die. I think it's, in my opinion, it's the best piece of short fiction ever written. I mean, it's a novella, but I adore it so much. And then in fantasy, it's easy. I mean, a lot of the fantasy authors who are awesome, who've been around for a while, they're fairly prolific too. I mean, Steven Erikson or Glenn Cook or, David Gemmell or whatever, or like my buddy Larry Correia, he's putting out so much stuff, Jim Butcher, I love those guys.
Yeah.
And so, so that for me, that's what it is. I like to recommend stuff that people are going to enjoy. Oh gosh, or like Bernard Cornwell. Oh, his Saxon Tales series is just, it's not even fair how good that series is. But I like recommending different sorts of stuff, and so it's fun that way. The genre that I have trouble with is science fiction. I have a hard time reading science fiction. And so many of the authors, they spend so little time with the characters.
Yeah.
It's all about the big idea.
And
that's fine. I have nothing wrong. I don't have anything against that, but it's not what I want to read.
Right.
I like characters, which is why I like horror and I like sword and sorcery and I like heroic fantasy and stuff like that. But this is probably why I like Chris Rocchio's stuff so much, because it is character focused first.
Right. For sure.
And same with like The Expanse. I love that series. Or Alistair Reynolds. He's one of the few guys who can mix in really big ideas, but show them to you through their characters, and
Reynolds
actually make you
that.
care. Gosh, he's so good.
But honestly, that's kind of it.
Yeah.
I don't like that much.
And Joel Shepherd.
Oh yeah, that's true. We have talked about Joel Shepherd. Yeah, he is really good. Out of Australia.
Yeah. I've tried to get him on my channel before. I gotta try again. So, you should get him on the podcast now.
I know. He's really good. The time difference would be the challenge.
Yeah,
Gosh.
that'd be killer. But yeah, no. It's interesting because well, actually, you were writing some sci-fi, weren't you?
I am. Yeah, I am writing. Yeah. I am writing science fiction. So I'm trying to figure out, because once I finish the sequel to Servants of War, and the final book in this Residue series, I kind of have a gap that I need to fill, and so there's two different series that I want to do, and one of them is like Supernatural Bosch, Supernatural The Wire, whatever you want to call it, a supernatural cop drama.
Okay.
And it's the one that I refer to, for people who listen, it's the one I refer to as Werewolf Cop. That sounds very B movie, and there literally is a B movie called Werewolf Cop, but it's not that way. It's very much like a almost a crime noir drama, where the main character, the detective, is bitten basically in the opening chapter, in the opening scene, and he becomes a werewolf. That book is called On the Devil's Side, which is a great title. It's one of the very few titles where I'm like, I did it, I got a good one. And it was inspired by watching the show Luther, which is one of my favorite cop drama shows ever made. And so I'm looking at that. Bain, my publisher Bain, wants me to write that for him.
Oh, cool.
So when I was at Liberty Con back in June of this year, I was talking with the folks at Bain, and I said, look, I have a science fiction idea, which is, I have a science fiction idea, and I have an urban fantasy idea. I don't, for Bain, for most traditional publishing, you don't tell them it's horror. If it's horror, you say it's urban fantasy, because most places won't buy straight up horror anymore. If they're traditionally published. Oh yeah, if you look, most horror, unless your last name is King or Hill, which is actually the same thing.
That explains why I've seen that Our Lady of Darkness advertises urban fantasy, and I was like, that's a weird label. I would just call it horror, but okay.
Yeah. Well, or like a lot of Dan Simmons stuff is published as like historical fiction. Abominable and Terror and stuff. I mean, they're shelved in horror, but they're not really advertised as horror, or things like that. But unless your name is Stephen King or Joe Hill, which is the same family, you're pretty much not. Your chances of getting horror published traditionally are pretty low. And Bain specifically says we don't do horror.
Yeah.
Even though for everyone who's read Servants of War, there's a lot of horror in that.
It's a little horrific. Heck, even the Hiram Woolley stuff.
Yeah.
DJ Butler has. It's kind of scary. At least that first book I found pretty scary.
Oh yeah. So. Well, and yeah, I mean, and Dave and I have talked about that, right? Like it's, you pitch it as, you're like, oh, it's dark fantasy, or oh, it's urban fantasy, dark urban fantasy, to kind of get around it, right? And so for this, I offered those two up, and Tony's response, Tony Weisskopf, who's the owner of Bain and head editor there, and she's wonderful. She said basically, oh, it's Steve? Oh, then I want the urban fantasy dark stuff. I'm like, oh, okay. The science fiction is my love letter to Alien and Gundam, because I like
what a combo.
Yeah. It works. Trust me, it works. I have a rationale for how it works, but
I mean, I'd read it anyways.
I love big stompy robots. I love Gundam. And if you've watched enough,
Are you the big stompy robots guy in Servants of War, or was that both you and Larry's idea?
That was different. Servants of War started out as game fiction for Privateer Press, for War Machine, and in the War Machine universe, and we've both written tie-in fiction for them. But there's big stompy kind of almost diesel punk robots in that world, and we were approached to write a novel for them, and then weird crap happened, and they decided they didn't want to do that anymore. Sorry for the dogs if you hear them.
That's good. I have kids in the background, so they've been pretty quiet.
My dogs are like this big.
Oh yeah.
Which means they feel like they need to be fierce. Give me 1 second.
Okay, you're good. I don't know if you saw this actually, but Joel Shepard actually just released a urban fantasy novel.
Oh, I didn't see this.
Which is interesting. I think it's called Angelina.
He does that. His fantasy series also had very it's like just the name of the character, like Sasha.
Oh yeah, it's like Sasha, yeah. Which I haven't read that one yet, but I've
It was,
just stuck to a sci-fi so far.
I
But
read the first one. It was pretty good. But anyway, so yeah, so Privateer Press kind of ghosted us. They were going through some issues, and the publisher who had the subrights to release these novels, they lost their head editor at the time. He left to go do his own thing. And so we were just kind of, we had this massive outline, and we were kind of dead in the water with it.
mm-hmm.
And then Bain wanted us to do a collaboration novel, and so we pitched him that. We said, yeah, we'll scrub the serial numbers off. And Tony was like, yeah, let's do it. So Larry and I got together and we said, okay, well, we have these giant robots, but they can't just be by themselves. In War Machine, they're basically sentient robots that kind of walk around. And in this, we're like, yeah, we can't do that. How do we make it cooler? And so that was where we came up with the idea of the golem, from Judaism, and Golem of Kiev and stuff like that. And so we said, like, we kind of came up with the, okay, well, what if golems are a thing? They're basically weapons of mass destruction in this world. When a full-on golem comes out, like, they'll plow through 1,000 men. They don't care. They're forces in nature. They're crazy. And then we said, okay, well, in religion, the way it worked was you wrote, and there's a couple different versions of this, obviously, but one of the versions is you would write the word life on the head of the golem, and then to summon it to do whatever you needed, usually protection or vengeance or whatever. And then you would wipe off one of the letters, and it changes the word from life to death, and then the golem would go away. We said, okay, well, what if one of those golems, when they get broken down and crushed and killed or whatever, what if pieces of that phrase that brought it to life still have power and still have magic in it? And you can find them on the battlefield. And so they take those and they put them on these suits of armor, and that's what magically powers the armor that is driven by people. And so that's where the Stompy robot idea came from for Servants of War. And basically, because that book is it's trench warfare fantasy, very World War I, in an alternate world that is connected to our own. But the golems, or the objects, the suits of armor is what they're called. They're basically that world's version of World War I tanks. They have a tank crew, and so that's what that is. So that was more of a combo effort. But when it comes to things like Gundam or whatever, that's just my personal love. I love that stuff way more than Larry does. And so I was like, you know what? I really want to write something like that. And I love Alien more than just about anything. And so I said, you know what if I can figure out a way to combine those two kind of sort of ideas and make a cool science fiction story out of it? And so that's what I did. That first book is already half written. It's called Call of the Void. And I'm shopping that one around right now. I might have a buyer for it. I'll find out in November. But yeah, that's very much, it's very character centric, because otherwise I get bored.
Yeah, I feel that as well. I mean, I like big ideas.
I do too.
But I like it when they're attached to characters, and you're just like, I feel like the big ideas even work better when they're attached to characters generally.
I agree. So. I totally agree. So like this one, okay. So if for people who have watched a lot of Gundam, and for the people who haven't, so effectively, Gundam has some very tropey things that happen in almost all the series. One of them is like intergalactic war crimes. Like, you know, they're dropping colonies and satellites on Earth to wipe out half of the planet, or blowing up an entire space colony.
Nice.
Like massive genocidal war crime. It's heavy stuff. And then the other big trope with it is that a younger kid, anywhere from 15 to 20, something like that, gets wrapped up in it because he can drive the suit of armor better than anyone else, usually for a very specific reason. It's not random. And so then you have the idea of how does someone who's younger cope with the fact that he's involved in a war where massive genocidal war crimes are happening. And oftentimes he has to participate in it. And so there's the big moral dilemmas, right? And so, so that's a world, or I've created this entire universe, and I'm writing novels in it. I'm co-writing novels in it. I've written some short stories in it. Lots and lots of plans for that,
Nice.
for that whole universe.
That's sweet.
It's a bit more, it's less traditional science fiction. It has more of a cyberpunk lean to
It's
it.
the best kind.
Yeah.
In my opinion, anyways. And my opinion is worth a lot, obviously.
It is.
No.
It's right.
Yeah, no. My biggest surprise for one of the reads this year obviously I read was Lavi Tidar's Central Station, because I read it and I wasn't expecting it to be like cyberpunk at all. It's cyberpunk and there's cyber vampires in it. I was like, whoa, this is awesome.
Yeah, I have the Violent Century on my to read list, just staring at me right there.
Yeah, I like Tidar. Everything I've read by him is pretty interesting. So
yeah,
he's an interesting guy. So I remember I recommended to you the Gorel and the Pot-Bellied God as swords and or guns and sorcery. Sorry. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, and I've written a kind of a sword and sorcery hard-boiled novella called "In the Gutters of Providence." And it's just like a 20,000 word novelette novella. Supposedly I wrote that in like a week. And supposedly it's through edits. And so I'm just waiting to see the document so I can see the edits and stuff.
I was gonna say, like, I haven't heard of this.
It's been really slow. The publisher for it has been kind of taking their time because he's been dealing with a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, I'm excited for that. You know, I'd like to write a couple novellas in this a year and link them all together, and then kind of do what my buddy Howard Andrew Jones did with Lord of a Shattered Land.
Yeah.
And kind of link them all together, kind of an episodic novel. He's actually the one that gave me the idea for it.
Oh, really? I can say
talking.
Another great Bane novel there. I read that one as well. In fact, I'm talking to Howard tomorrow.
Oh, good. No, Howard's awesome. Howard's one of my favorite people on this planet. I love that dude. He's awesome. He's a phenomenal writer, great storyteller. And so I'm excited for him to be there, to be at Bane and stuff. But yeah, I mean, when he told me what he was doing, because he and I were at Gen Con together last year. And we were kind of talking about, because his Bane deal had just been publicly announced, and so we were talking about it and stuff. We shared a room, and so we were kind of hanging out and eating all the good foods at Indianapolis. And so we were chatting and stuff. And he's like, "Yeah, this is what I'm doing." And he told me, I'm like, "Dang, that's kind of awesome." And he read. I have a collection of short stories. It's this one. It's called What Hellhounds Dream. And there's a story in there that serves as intro fiction to a role-playing game called For Coin and Blood. It's done by a guy named Alan Barr. His company is called Gallant Night Games. Really good stuff. but he wanted me to write a just a short, like 2,500 word piece of intro fiction to this game. I said, sure, why not? So I did. And at the con, Alan gave me kind of a contributor copy of the second edition of the game, where my story is still featured in the front.
Oh, cool.
And so I brought it back to my hotel room. I was like, hey, Howard, can you read this intro fiction when you get a sec and tell me what you think? See if it feels like it would work for kind of like a sword and sorcery sort of idea. And so one of the mornings he read it and he's like, dude, that was great. He's like, that's really good. He's like, it's a little dark for just pure sword and sorcery. And I said, yeah. I'd pull it back a little bit. And so, so he read that and loved it and everything, and that was all good. And so I said, if I wrote stories with that kind of character, wrote a sequence of stories on it, I'm like, what do you think? He's like, yeah, you should do it. And then, you do what I did with Lord of Shattered Land and just kind of like, make sure there's a through line where you can kind of cobble them together and make an actual cohesive narrative out of it. So at the very beginning of the year, Alan from Gallant Knight Games, he's like, hey, Steve, I've actually had a lot of people asking me about more fiction, like your piece at the start of that game. He's like, do you want to write a novella? I said, yeah, sure. I said, well, how long do you want it? He said, actually, just like a really short thing, like 10,000 words or something. I said, oh, so more like a novelette. Cool. And so I started writing it. I got excited, which is dangerous. And I started writing it. And that week, by the time I was done, I turned it over to him and I said, Alan, sorry, here's your 20,000 word story. He's like, dude, you're killing me. But I'm excited for it because I'd really like to write a few. I mean, it's 20,000 words. I can write, 5 or 6 of those time together, and I think it could turn into a fun little novel. And then in the meantime, I can just sell them as novellas.
That's true.
So that's the plan right now, is to sell this one as a novella, kind of gauge the interest, and then write the follow-up and a couple follow-ups and stuff.
Sweet. Yeah.
So
sounds good. Sounds nice.
Yeah, I'm hoping that comes out this year too. So it's been kind of a busy year.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah.
Man, I need to get my sneaker novella published, man. Wow. That reminds me. Anyways,
Indeed.
Yeah. That also reminds me of RPG, like fiction, tabletop role-playing game fiction kind of thing in general, which is, I would say, it's kind of died down a little bit in recent years. At least with some big guys. Like, I don't think there's any more Pathfinder fiction. I know there's no not really any D&D stuff. But
no, Pathfinder's fiction kind of died. I actually don't know why. I think it might have just been distribution and stuff. Privateer Press was doing it for a while, obviously. I wrote some stuff for them. And then they kind of screwed me. But they don't do fiction really anymore. 40K always does it. They're always going to do it.
That's true.
But the two IPs that are still putting out fiction fairly regularly is L5R, Legend of the Five Rings, and which is Magic Samurai, and then Arkham Horror.
Oh yeah,
they're still doing stuff too through Chaosium, but it's far less. I guess BattleTech is still doing stuff with and Shadowrun, but I don't know what the readership is for that stuff anymore. You're right. It feels like it's much less now than it used to be. At a certain point, it seemed like literally every RPG company had tie-in fiction coming out through it.
Yeah, in a decent amount. It seemed like
it really did. But not as much anymore.
Yeah, I realize I can imagine. I realized I have read one of the Arkham Horror novels, Rosemary Jones, who wrote some Forgotten Realms novels
Oh.
as well. So I was big into Forgotten Realms. I still am. I mean, like I have 150 Forgotten Realms novels or something ridiculous like that. So I mean, that's like half of them. And so I mean, like,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, they're and they still put out a few things, not nearly what they used to, not
mhm.
nearly. I was working at a bookstore for a while, managing a bookstore, and it felt like every month there were a couple new releases in through Forgotten Realms or whatever.
Or Dragonlance or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. One of those two. And it does. They, man, the quantity has dropped off dramatically since then.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, Salvatore still puts out his stuff
Salvatore.
because he basically invented tie-in fiction.
Yeah, and then we got Weiss and Hickman, I guess, have their new Dragonlance
Yeah, apparently they're
series.
doing
So
stuff. Yeah,
I haven't read it,
but
but
there's just not that many anymore, which is a bummer. But I mean, I would just like more avenues for more people to publish. That's what I think.
right, yeah. Yeah. And it a lot of that tie-in fiction, it did seem to help like almost like indie authors in a sense, right? Because like a lot of it's smaller, in the
Yeah.
press as far as it's concerned. So I mean, like, and I've seen some authors who would start with like, well, heck, even Howard, didn't he do Pathfinder novels for a while?
He did.
Right?
He did 3 or 4. I might be underestimating, actually. It might be more. I have one down there that I didn't even realize I had. I'm like, where did I get that? But yeah, he wrote a few. He wrote
Yeah.
at least 3. I feel like he wrote 4 to 6. Sounds like the right
Yeah.
number to me.
I haven't read any of them. I mean, but I haven't read any Pathfinder novels as it
Me
is.
neither.
Like I said, I've read a decent amount of like Dragonlance and like Forgotten Realms. I've read 70 Forgotten Realms novels. So I mean, like
That's a lot.
I'll probably read another one here soon. But it's just weird. Yeah, I mean, like I know Fate of the Norns does have some tie-in fiction, which is interesting.
Oh,
It's like pretty new. I can't remember who the heck publishes that. Is it Pelgrane? I don't remember.
that sounds. That
But
could be right.
Ed Greenwood did a novel for them. So I read that because I'll read Ed Greenwood, no matter what he writes, because some of that stuff is pretty crazy, but or even spicy, if you could say.
There is that.
Yeah,
There is that.
I heard he wrote oh shoot, I just am blanking on the name of that big series that everyone has like a pin name and it's like their romance novels. What the heck is that series
Oh,
called? It's huge. There's like hundreds of novels. I don't even know if I've seen one in person ever. Wow, I'm blanking.
you're not talking about Harlequin, are you?
Harlequin. Yeah, he wrote a
Yeah.
Harlequin romance.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah,
Wouldn't surprise me.
Which is just funny to me. But
They make those books make a ton of money.
Oh, really? Okay. That
I mean,
shouldn't surprise me actually.
romance outsells everyone by a lot.
Crazy.
They're shorter books.
Mhm.
They're very, very formulaic, although that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
If you're not following the formula, then you're doing it wrong for those types of books. Not my thing for sure. But but yeah, so I know there's been a lot of authors that they'll throw on a pen excuse me, they'll throw on a pen name and go write romance and stuff, just to see if they can make a buck. And some of
Yeah.
them do.
Oh man,
Not really my thing.
that's wild. Yeah, I mean, there's always the avenues that there's more potential for money making.
Sure.
I mean, like me, I mean, I can't. I hate most things that make money for some reason, and so like I'm just sitting here in poverty my whole life. No,
Yeah.
And so
It's
I mean,
hard, right? I mean, fantasy and science fiction are some of the lower selling genres on the whole.
mhm.
And that's part of the experiment with these techno thrillers that I'm writing with Mike Rothman, because thrillers outsell fantasy by a lot. And so we just want to see what happens. we're going to put out a bunch of them and see how it works. Release them in pretty quick timing within a few months each. Because there's that whole problem where people will not buy the first book in a series if it's a brand new series.
Yeah.
Which so
I don't actually understand. I mean, I get it kind of, but like,
I
don't follow it at all.
Like, I don't agree with it to a large extent, but I understand why. I mean, readers have been burned by authors who have taken more than a decade or more, 2 decades. I mean, let's not pretend that Rothman and Martin are the only guys that have taken lots of time in between books. I mean,
yeah,
Jordan
Steve,
took a lot of time.
Come on, Residue came out forever ago.
Like, it really did. It really did. It did, and I feel bad about that. But Residue has been published through 4 or 5 different presses now. I almost quit writing actually because of all the issues I was having with it.
Oh man.
But I ended up sticking with it. I guess fortunately for some.
That's good, yeah.
But I mean, there's lots of authors who have just kind of left a series hanging. I mean, Robert Jordan was leaving people hanging for a while, and then people, once they found out that he was actually like terminally ill and he passed away, they're like, oh, okay, well that's a totally different game.
Yeah. Or Rune Lords, I think, is still expecting book 9 or something.
Yeah. Well, and we know why a lot of the part of that is because Farland passed away, and part of that is because he was chasing Hollywood for a while. He was trying to get it made into a Hollywood, and through there, and it just never worked. One of my favorites was J.V. Jones. She was published with Tor, and it. I think she published 4 books in her series, and then.
Which series is that? I know like Baker's Boys is by her, right, or something like that.
Yeah, what was that series called? Gosh dang it! Now I'm gonna have to look it up.
I can think of another series too, actually, and I can't remember what the hell it's called, but I think it's Melanie Ron.
Yep, Melanie Ron.
She had that trilogy, and she only has 2 books finished, and it's been like that for like 20 years or so.
Yep. Yeah, so it was the series is called Sword of Shadows by J.V. Jones. And she put out 4 books in it, but they were supposed to be like 5 or 6. Baker's Boy is a separate trilogy by her.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a bummer. It was a bummer that her series just kind of stopped. And so look, I mean, it happens.
It does, yes.
But because we're such a, the internet has made the world such a small place that it's really easy for people to now get online and talk to each other and complain about how things aren't perfect. And so, so that's part of the problem, right? I mean, when I'm at a convention like FanX or whatever, I'm like this one last year, we were selling a bunch of copies of Servants of War. Now, fortunately, we didn't have any trouble selling them, but there were a lot of people who said, who I tried to pitch the book to, and they were like, "Oh, okay, well, cool. Is it done?" I'm like, no, not even close. Like, well, then I'm not going to buy it. I'm like, okay. And most of them cite Martin and Rothfuss.
That's so lame.
And
do I look like Rothfuss to you?
It does suck because, I mean, if you think about it, for a publisher, the biggest indicator that they need to publish more books in that series are sales. And so, but if no one sells, if they don't buy the book because they're like, oh, I'm not going to do it until I get until I get 3 more books in the series. Like we can't compete with that. It takes time to write a book.
Right. Yeah.
And so, especially a fantasy novel, which is, Servants of War is 150,000 words.
Yeah.
They ain't short.
Novels.
And
this is an aside, but I was impressed with how Howard was able to make Lord of Shadowlands so thick and still feel so sword and sorcery.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, I'm impressed with him. And it might have been the episodic nature of it, right?
I'd imagine, yeah, it works really well.
Yeah. So I'm excited for him. He, I think book 2 in that series comes out in October.
Yeah. Speaking of taking a long time, yeah, book 2 does come out in October, and
yeah, I know.
3 done already, or is he doing edits on 3 or something like?
He's finishing off 3 right now.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, at least last time I talked to him, that's what he said. But yeah, he's. I mean, that was part of the sales pitch to Bane was, hey, like, here's 2 books already done. Well, and then Bane's being smart about it. They're marketing it and they're releasing them really, really quick. So it's looking like 2 books a year are going to get released in that series. Which is actually really, really fast for traditional published stuff. So
yeah,
I'm interested to see how it works from a marketing standpoint, see if it generates traction and if it helps him get over that, it's called the adoption hump of the novel, the series quicker. I hope it does. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, you can get the arc for book 2 now, I guess, even so.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Bane must
does
have it
a
listed.
3-month thing. Look, it already has 19 ratings on Amazon at 4.9 too. It's nice.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. But yeah, so we'll see. I'm trying to. I'm just trying to over here to kind of grind away and make sure that I can get enough books out and stuff. So, I mean, technically, I'll have 4 books come out this year.
Wow.
So, Residue, Parasite, New Arcadia, and then Operation Thrall. And then, hopefully the novella. I've written enough short stories last year and this year, to where I'll probably put together another collection at the end of next year. So
I realized when you mentioned earlier that I didn't pick up a copy of What Hellhounds Dream at LTUE. That's where I got my copy of Residue. And I'm just a broke little boy all the time, and so I just was like, I can only get one. So
I'm proud of the Hellhounds anthology. That's a lot of my earlier fiction. A lot of it was unpublished before then. And then after every story, I just put a little blurb after every story talking about why I think it was published, why I think it wasn't published, kind of where I got some of the ideas from, things like that.
Sweet. I like collections that do that, honestly.
Yeah.
Those are awesome. More authors should do that.
I read some, oh gosh, what was it? It was some horror anthology a while back. It might have been a Joe Lansdale anthology. And it did that after every story. And I remember reading it and going, oh, that's cool. Like, I kind of feel like I know the author a little bit better, and that's neat. And so I resolved right then and there that if I ever managed to actually write anything, that I would, when I put together a collection of short stories, that's what I would do. So I did. But yeah, I have a lot of published short stories that have either just come out or are coming out. So in fact, I'm finishing off one right now that was kind of an emergency story for an anthology.
Huh. I don't think I've read any of your short stories, which is kind of odd.
Yeah, I've got quite a few out there now. The Hellhounds anthology has, I don't know, 14 or 15 stories in it. And then and then I will have another collection come out probably towards the tail end of next year. Depends on when the rights revert back to me on a lot of the short stories. But it'll have my Monster Hunter story from Larry's world in it. It'll have the prequel story to Servants of War in it. And then it'll have, gosh, It'll have my Winnie the Pooh story in it.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that anthology.
So funny. Actually, probably the darkest thing I've ever written.
Oh, okay.
You know, I mean, so I have tons of stories. I mean, I had an anthology, or I had a story in an anthology every month for like 3 or 4 months straight, earlier this year.
Wow, nice.
And then I have 3 or 4 coming out like in January or February of next year. So it's a lot, you know. But so I'll be able to put together a nice another collection of stories there, and then I'll write a couple new pieces for it and put that out. So you know, just trying to stay busy, just trying to kind of keep it going.
Sounds like you're staying busy. I need to probably put pedal to the metal on writing more myself, but
You know, I thought so right after I got laid off at the end of last year. You know, I threw myself a pity party for a couple days to you know, to deal, and then I got to work, and so I wrote full time for about 6 months, 5 months, something like that, and
nice.
you know, played at being a full time writer, which was good. I got a lot done, but one of the biggest things I learned during that phase was how much time I'd wasted before. You know, I thought I was busy, and I was, and I thought I was tired, and I was, but you know, there's a lot of hours that passed me by before getting laid off, where I'm like, you know what, I could have churned out. I probably could have had another couple books done, just over the course of a few years if I'd have, you know, worked a little bit harder. I mean, there's always points where you're just gonna be like, nah, I'm too tired. Like, you know, I mean, there was this fairly long stretch where I was working 70 or 80 hours a week, and when you're doing that, you're not getting anything done. You just aren't.
Right.
Or you know, like I haven't written anything for the better part of this week because it hurts to stare at a screen. Because you know, I got head butted. We were talking before the show. I got head butted in the face earlier this week at a concert, and so I've just had constant headaches. And I've had trouble breathing out of this side of my nose. So you know, like weird stuff happens, but you know, you just have to kind of power through some of it if you want to do it. So yeah, you know.
Yeah,
we make do.
Yeah, I was writing a lot more like early this year, and it kind of peaked right around this time. Edward M. Culver Awards, you know.
Nice.
And
congratulations on your award.
Oh, thank you.
I have a mug. I have a cup somewhere around here from that.
Oh, nice. It's my most prestigious award.
Well, yes.
So
it's the only award that actually
on
matters.
my channel, actually.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about putting it on my website. I think I put it on LinkedIn actually.
It'll generate as much sales as any other award.
Right, exactly.
So
yeah, so I finished a story there, and then I that was the end of March. And then I think I finished my novella actually in April, wrote a little bit more in April. And then I kind of got into like, I was looking for like an editor and for an artist just so I could self-pub the novella real quick. And the artist like agreed to do it, but okay, I know him personally, right? So like I was like, let me go to him, right? Because like I used to play D&D with him. He does tattoos now mostly, but he used to do like, you know, digital artwork. Like he did the logo for the esports team at ASU, for example.
Oh, okay.
And he's pretty good. And so I was like, let me do him, but then he's just like, it hasn't like come together for some reason. And then like the editor I contacted, even though Christopher recommended this one to me, and she never got back to me. And so I'm just like, great, let me just like I was like, what the heck? Okay, like I wanted this out like before FanX, so just in case I went to I don't have tickets to FanX right now, but just in case I want, you know, to have something to sell necessarily, or have at least. So, but
yeah, it's it's hard, right? I mean, finding an editor who actually comes with, you know, like a pretty decent rep isn't the easiest thing to find.
Apparently,
and then getting someone who can actually come up with a pretty decent cover and cover design for you. I mean, because the last thing you don't want it to look like it's self-published.
right? Yeah, but then you know this comes into
it is. You know, here's the funny thing. So that cover for that new cover for Residue and the cover for Parasite, I think those covers were only $200.
Oh, that's not bad.
That's not bad at all.
Yeah.
You know, the most good artists, you're going to pay a lot of money for. I mean, $2,000 to $5,000 for a cover.
Yeah. Yikes.
And, you know,
but it sells, hopefully, right? I mean, like a good cover, hopefully.
Yeah. You know, theoretically, that's the goal.
I mean, I've seen some great Dan Dos Santos covers on Butler's stuff, and I don't think those sell all that great. So, but they're great novels, I should say.
Yeah. I mean, marketing is a whole different thing. But, you know, that's good marketing is going to sell your book better than a cover will. But if all things are equal and you can get a good cover, then you should. And it's more than just the cover. Like there's cover art and there's cover design.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest challenge that Chris and I have, for example, for the Diamond Edition, is we got a great cover. Got just a wonderful piece of cover art.
He showed me a picture actually of last week or something like that, like a mock-up that he said probably will change.
Yeah, it's so yeah. If you saw the one from last week, then that one's getting really close.
I thought it looked good.
No, it does. It looks really, really good now. But it's hard because you can have the most wonderful piece of cover art, and if the design and the typography that are put on it don't match, then you're going to have an issue.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yikes. You know, or you can have a fairly mediocre piece of art, but if the cover design on it is amazing, then it's good. Okay. So like the cover for Residue, the actual art on it, it's not special, but the design on it, the typography, is excellent.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I was gonna give this an example actually.
Yeah. And then the new cover for it is the same. It follows suit. The cover, the actual art on it is fine. It's good. But the design on it and the way that the typography kind of evokes a very specific feel, brings it all up. It makes it greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, it brings it together.
You know, and so that's super important. And so, you know, and it has to look good at a thumbnail size so that it's easy to read. I mean, there's all sorts of weird stuff for that. But yeah, so that's hard.
It can look bad on both counts and still sell well. I mean, I think of the original Drist, those covers are horrendous.
They're all bad.
My goodness.
They're all bad.
But I think it's Lockwood. He did
correct.
He redid. Yeah, I have one.
Yeah,
out there, I guess. So
yeah.
Lockwood.
If it's a dragon, I know we can count on Lockwood to make it awesome. If it's people, it's very hit or miss for him. I have a lot of books with his covers on them.
Yeah, no, the Malazan books as well. I have.
Yeah,
I think I have one right here as well. So
yeah,
I think it's Lockwood. So
yeah. See, on that series, I actually prefer the UK covers.
You do? Okay. I can kind of see that.
Well, the biggest trouble he had, especially in the US, is that they went through like 3 or 4 different artists
Oh, really?
So the first artist is completely unrelated, and I don't even remember who the first artist is for Gardens of the Moon.
Huh.
And then the second book, Dead House Gates, has an awesome cover. But it's a UK version. And there's no
Yeah,
people on it
there's-
really. It's just of the
yeah.
storm. And then in book 3, Memories of Ice, that's when Todd Lockwood starts coming on board.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those are good and some of them aren't. But then by the end of the series, it went back to a different UK artist.
Yeah, books 9 and 10 have different ones. So
yeah, and so it's kind of bizarre, but whatever. I mean, the books are far superior to the covers that grace them.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's great because some artists, they'll just they'll make the book pop basically just because. Well, I mean, there's some that are again like hit or miss. Like I find Sweet actually to be kind of hit or miss. Daryl K. Sweet.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of him of his stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, he did all the Jordan covers, obviously, and then a lot of Lee Modest's Recluse novels.
Man, I'm not a huge fan of the Wheel Time covers for almost any of them actually.
Nope.
But a lot of people love Sweet because of those, and I was like, what?
The earlier you're at in the series, the better they are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he got pretty ill and passed away and stuff.
Oh, really?
And so he was just kind of hanging on, and those were basically the only covers he was doing. And so that's why Waylon did the final cover for.
Oh yeah, that's series. Right. And Waylon is like the best in the business almost.
He's really good. He's really, really good. For me, it's guys like I really like oh geez. I just totally blanked on his name. He did the Brian Lumley covers. Bob Eggleton. Bob Eggleton does really, really good stuff. Really good monsters. He actually does a lot of science fiction stuff too. Of course, I love Swanland. Who, I mean, with all of your Forgotten Realms books, like half of those are Swanland.
Swanland,
and they're all good. But that dude's expensive.
I can imagine.
First, he's hard to get a hold of,
really?
and to schedule, and then I think his covers start at like $5,000.
Oh, really? That doesn't surprise me, man.
And I can't afford that.
He's great. One day, maybe. I think they'd look great. Steve Diamond with the
gosh, you kidding me?
Cover.
I would kill to have one of those covers. I would kill.
Yeah. I can see several books actually with Swanland covers from my spot, and most of them Forgotten Realms. But and Glenn Cook, some of the omnibus ones and stuff like that. So.
Yep, the stuff that he did for Nightshade, books before they went under. He did all the omnibuses for him.
Man,
but he's freaking awesome. He's awesome. There's so many good artists out there. You just have to find ones that aren't gonna try to gouge you.
Right. Yeah.
Stay within your art budget.
I mean, it's nice to see some still doing stuff. I mean, Brom writes his own books now, doesn't he? I mean,
and Brom is, in fact, I think he just put out a book earlier, at the very beginning of this year.
Yeah. The Frazetta piece just sold for $6 million at auction. Dark Kingdom, I think, is the piece. And yeah, I mean, Mates still does some. I found out recently that Mates is in a co-studio with Janny Wirtz because they're married, and I didn't realize that.
Oh,
so
I had no idea.
Yeah, they're married, and I didn't know that.
Don Mates is awesome, though. He does a lot of stuff for Cemetery Dance.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, he's done a lot of Stephen King special.
Yeah. I mean, he did the Book of the New Sun for Wolf, and I know he did some Forgotten Realms as well, was it the Threat from the Sea trilogy, which it's 4 books, but it's one piece of art that got split over 4 books, so it connects, and it's pretty sweet looking.
I do. Oh man, so. I'm kind of a sucker for that marketing art gimmick. So my buddy Larry, he's finishing off his fantasy series right now, his saga of the Forgotten Warrior.
I need to read that one still.
What's that? Oh, it's really good. It's like the main character is basically just Judge Dredd
in a fantasy world. It's awesome.
Nice.
But so he's writing the 5th book in the series right now. It's meant to be a 5-book series, but he's discovering that to wrap up everything satisfactorily for himself, and for the reader, that book is getting huge. So they very well might turn it into a 6-book series and then just release the last 2 books like within 2 months of each other.
Okay.
Kind of like what happened with Jim Butcher in the latest Dresden Files book. You know, he turned in like a 350,000 word book or 400,000 word book, and they're like, Jim, we're not publishing a 400,000 word book for you. We're just going to split it. So Larry, it's possible that Larry might do that, which is fine with me. I mean, the more the merrier in that series. But I was laughing with Tony Weisskopf the other day, and I was like, man, like Kurt Miller, because Kurt Miller's doing the art for those, and the back cover art for him is just phenomenal. It's so good. And so I said, you know, it really seems like there's a really nice opportunity for you if this turns into a 2-book finale, that you get like one really awesome piece of Kurt Miller art and just split it for each back cover of the book.
That would be cool.
And she's like, of course, that's what we're going to do. Like, I'm a sucker for that stuff. I love that stuff. So,
man, I didn't realize there was art on the back of this. Oh man,
it's really good. It's really, really good.
I've seen the original Elmore cover for the first one.
Not my favorite.
Not my favorite either. Actually.
Yeah. So Larry Elmore did the original cover for it. And at the time, Barnes and Noble was like, hey, for fantasy, we actually don't want like full art covers anymore.
Yeah.
We just want like
a
symbol cover or whatever. And so so they're like, well, crap. I mean, we commissioned Larry Elmore to do this cover. Like, what do we do?
It wasn't cheap, I'm sure.
Oh. And so so they zoomed in on like the belt buckle of one of the main characters in the Larry Elmore art, and that became the symbol.
Oh man.
And so after that, for books 2, 3, and 4, the artist Kurt Miller, who does a lot of stuff for Bane, he started doing that. And so he would come up with the symbol art for the front, but then he would paint like an entire piece to go on the back of the hardcover. And it's really, really good.
That's cool.
It's really good. Really, really good. I love those pieces. But so I'm excited. I'm excited for this series to finish off. And Larry's excited for it to finish off too, because he's like, hey, you know, then he'll be able to tell everybody it's a full, complete series. Buy all of it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Which, you know, even then, like, I don't even agree with the idea of buying a whole series before you've read one word of it. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just like such a weird concept to me about like.
It is. It's really bizarre. It's really bizarre. But, you know, whatever. I mean, in this kind of binge society, they could buy the first book, read it, and then if they like it, then they're like, okay, well, I decided I like it, so I'm going to go buy the next 5 books. Whatever.
Yeah. I guess that is a point, though. I mean, people do binge things. I generally read a book in a series, and then like it might be a year later before I read the next one. So
yeah, or you know, with audio being so prevalent, you know, Audible constantly has sales, and so
it's true.
You know,
I just bought a book from their sale the other day.
Yeah, I mean, so you could pick up, you know, at a certain point in time, you could probably pick up like all 6 books in a series for $5 each.
Right.
And that's cheap. I mean, that's cheap for audio.
Yeah.
So
I got Road Marks by Zelazny, and I was like, that book is not worth any more than $5 because it's so short. And so I'm like, I'm not buying this full price. So.
Yeah. You know, I bought there's a while there, and I don't even know if he's still putting out books in this series. It's been a long time. The author E. Knight had that Vampire Earth series. It's kind of a post-apocalyptic alien invasion thing with vampires. I don't know. And but they put they had all of the books in the series on sale for like $3 or $4 each at one point. So I just bought them all. It was like 10 books. Or I did that with the science fiction series by Jack Campbell, The Lost Fleet, which is actually pretty fun. But again, they're like $3 each or $5 each. And I'm like, yeah, I'll buy all those on audio at that point. Like that's super value. And if I don't like them, it is like the cost of like 1 or 2 hardcovers maybe to get the entire series. So you don't feel like you're out a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Steam sale mentality, right? Like you'll just buy it all because it's cheap and you'll probably never pay for them.
Yeah.
Or play them.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So, it's
That's a
wild.
good comparison. That's a good comparison. Yeah.
But
I like it when they're bundled like an audio, like you can get I think all the Barsoom books as one purchase.
oh, interesting.
So it's like what, 13 or something ridiculous.
That's a lot.
Or like the new Elric, right? The volumes you get for 1 credit or whatever if you're using credits, I guess. For
Yeah.
Audible, so very much worth it.
Yeah, I the Galaxy's Edge books that Nick Cole and Jason Anspach have been putting together. I think what they did is they bundled 2 books at a time together. Books like 1 and 2 are in one, and then 2 and 3, or 3 and 4, and so on for like the first 6 or 8 books. Might be 8 books, 8 or 10 books in that series. They're pretty fun. They're short, but they're entertaining. Very character based, which is why I can deal with it for science fiction. So
Nice.
And they're pretty cool guys. I've talked with them a few times. They're nice.
Huh. I think I think I listened to the end of Book of the Long Sun, actually, I think, and I'm pretty sure it bundles the two books, just like that's how you buy them physically these days.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
Books
so,
1 and 2 are together, and then 3 and 4 are together. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure there's an audiobook bundle that's just like that, if I'm remembering correctly too. So
it wouldn't surprise me. Trying to look at my shelves, see what, because I have those somewhere. My shelves are a disaster.
I'm not even sure Short Sun's still in print, actually, which I need to read next. But it's the one after Long Sun.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But so we'll see. I don't know, man. I mean, publishing's kind of in a weird spot right now. We're fighting to, there's so many indie books that come out, and the vast majority of them are garbage.
True.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great ones. But
no, don't get me that. No. In fact, I think we're seeing unprecedented quality from independent publishing now. Stuff that I don't think anyone ever thought would actually be possible, because for whatever reason. But I mean, we're seeing such good stuff now, independent published. But there's still a mountain of crap.
Yes.
but then on the traditionally published side, it takes so long for a book to be released.
Yeah.
And so there's really no way, like these traditionally published houses, they're not learning. And they're not seeing how they need to be a bit more agile and responsive or whatever to how the market works. And so,
I mean, I've heard some things about publishing houses that they were not the most flattering things.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's been going on for a while. I mean, it's not new. I mean, so back when I used to run the book review site, Elitist Book Reviews, I would get hundreds of books a month. It felt like, definitely dozens a month from the various publishers. And it was shocking to see, like, from a marketing perspective, from a publicity perspective, how little publishers kind of seemed to understand what they were doing. It was shocking. So it's, it's hard. I mean, but they've got to adapt. They've got to adapt. All those traditional publishers, they have to adapt, or they're going to get their lunch eaten by an indie.
Right, exactly. And I'm sure they don't.
And a lot of them already are.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting because I'm sure they're not like making bank, anyways. So like you think they'd be kind of on top of things.
Well, a lot of them are just stuck in their old mentality, so they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Tor, right? Like Tor puts out some really good books. They put out some really,
Yeah.
really good books. And historically speaking, they've put out some incredible fiction.
Hmm.
But you know, their biggest author right now is Brandon Sanderson.
Hmm.
And Brandon was like, yeah, that's cute. And then he went out and runs a $50 million Kickstarter. Like, he doesn't
Yikes.
need them.
Sure. Yeah.
He doesn't need them. They need him.
Yeah.
And so,
It's interesting.
and I don't know anything as how this goes, but you know, what are they doing to learn from what Brandon did? You know, how are they changing their business process to match this, to take advantage of this? It kind of seems like they're not doing anything,
Hmm.
and that's a bummer. I mean, the last thing we want to see is all these publishing houses go away.
Yeah, that would.
That would suck.
Yeah, that
I
would
mean,
be.
from a guy who writes for one of them, that would suck.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Man, didn't Simon and Schuster just get purchased? Actually.
They did.
Oh man.
They did, and they got published by published. They got purchased by a mergers and acquisitions firm, and so
Yikes.
so that's some people are excited by it because Simon and Schuster's kind of been a dumpster fire for a while.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of people like myself, I'm worried about it.
Yeah.
Mergers and acquisitions. If an M&A firm buys you, it's because they are going to sell you for parts within 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And that's from firsthand experience.
Yeah,
that's why I got laid off.
Wait,
because the company I was working for got acquired, and then
does Simon and Schuster, are they the ones that distribute Bane's books? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, and they own like Saga Press and probably
Correct.
several other things of parties. So
Yep. And so I mean, so it's a big deal.
Yeah, that didn't excite me when I read it, to be honest.
No,
I mean, so
no, it doesn't give me the warm fuzzies. Now it could all go swimmingly. It could all go where they whoever is now in charge of dealing with their contracts with the various other publishers that they distribute could be awesome and could come in and say, what do you guys need? What do we need to make this successful? And if they do that, that's a win for everybody. But I'm kind of a pessimist when it comes to this. I've been through the last 2 companies I worked for underwent mergers and acquisitions, and it was garbage, and it sucked.
Yay.
So I'm like, oh, great. Yay, just one more. So I don't know.
You can't hide, Steve.
I feel like I'm a freaking magnet for it now. I swear everywhere I go, they're like, oh, by the way, we're doing mergers and acquisitions now. I'm like, God, you got to be kidding me.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's funny because, like, I mean, you would think they could like go faster in some ways because I mean, like, we already kind of established that TSR, Wizards Coast, they were kind of indie, but like some of those series just came out like insanely quickly. I mean, like, Ed Greenwood, I think, wrote the first Elminster book in like a month, and it came out like right after. Like,
yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, I don't know. So there's another publisher who I know. I know the owners over there. They're good dudes. They publish a lot of good stuff. Athon Books. They primarily focus on science fiction and like lit RPG stuff. They make idiotic amounts of money off lit RPG.
I'm not surprised.
It's not my thing. I don't know that I would ever write
at all,
it.
but yeah.
I probably wouldn't write it unless I don't know, unless I just had the perfect idea. So never say never. But they do really, really well in science fiction, especially military science fiction. But their whole business model is catering to ebooks.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're a traditional press, but they're acting more like indie, and they're taking advantage of marketing in a more indie way. And so their
Yeah.
authors are making a lot of stupid money.
That's interesting. I know like Chris Kennedy Publishing, they seem to be, doing well.
They're doing
with their
okay.
stuff,
I don't think their authors, I don't think they have quite the sales that Aethon does.
Probably not.
But you know, I mean, good gracious. I mean, at LibertyCon, I went to lunch with 3 of Aethon's top 4 science fiction authors. And they told me what they made, and it was stupid. And I'm like,
Nice.
and the funny thing is, in terms of quantity of sales, I know it's less than some traditionally published authors I know.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh, dang. And I had a conversation with one of those authors, and I'm like, I know how much money they're making. And he goes, I know how much they sell. He's like, and it's less than me. I'm like, oh. So we're like, huh. So, I mean, I'm an accountant. And so, I start doing the math, and I'm like, oh boy, like these traditional publishers, they really need to change how they're doing things. They're going to lose a lot of their traditionally published authors. Those guys will just go indie.
Yeah.
They can sell, even if they sell the exact same amount of copies or less, they'll make more money.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a
right. I mean, that's
what are the other benefits? What is it that your traditionally published house is doing for you that you can't get self-published? And if you can find out what that is, and they're offering that to you, and it works, then that's awesome.
Yeah, because in some ways it's nothing actually. It's like
for a lot of
times, bad art in a lot of cases. Even like I just hate like book cover trends in general. In most cases, I hate minimalism. Sorry, but I mean, I study art, so like I don't like the minimalism stuff. I guess if I was a postmodernist, maybe I would, but no. But so yeah, it's just interesting, man. I mean, because I think of like Joel Shepherd, right? He ditched traditional publishing and does his stuff self-publishing now. So
well, yeah. Well, I mean, his U.S. publisher is, for all intents and purposes, collapsed. They still exist, but they don't do anything anymore, really. That's Pyre.
Oh yeah.
And see, he had really good cover art on his initial science fiction stuff. He had stuff on Martinaire.
Yes, and he still gets Martinaire for his self-pub stuff. So
really,
yeah,
that guy's expensive too.
Yeah.
Though I would kill to have him do my my science fiction.
As I say, speaking of sci-fi like arts, like that guy.
So good. Well, and that's who Brandon Sanderson had for his very first book, Elantris. Same guy.
Oh really? Oh, it is. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
It is. Oh, and that's what initially drew me to it. I'm like, dude, this cover art's awesome. So it's, I just don't know what's going to happen. If traditional publishers can offer me and other authors enough of an incentive to stay with them, then you stay with them. I'm pretty convinced that hybrid is the way to go, where you get a traditional publisher, you build up a fan base that way. And then once you've built up a fan base, then you start self-publishing and marketing to them direct. That seems to be the ideal way. Now, will that work for everybody? No. Because not everybody's going to be able to get traditionally published.
Right. Yeah. And even then, I mean, like, doesn't mean you're going to make great sales either. So
that's right. And so I don't know. I mean, my goal is to be more of a hybrid hybrid author, have stuff published through Baen or whatever. Like I do, gain a following through that. And then while that's going on, just start selling direct to the fans that I have. Short stories and novels and novellas and stuff, especially in like novellas, right? Like no one buys novellas. Like no publishers will publish a novella. They just don't anymore.
For the most part, yeah. I mean, Tor.com, I can think, and then
it's
and then like some like they self-publish or whatever. as a novella, but it's really a novel generally, anyways. I mean, like, just a short novel by today's standards. So,
yeah, I mean, I look at guys like, Brian McClellan, right? I mean, I've been friends with him for a long, long time, and that's what he does. He's found a pretty good established fan base for himself.
Yeah.
And now he puts out novellas direct to market, direct to his fans. And that's how they do it. I mean, Chris does that.
Yeah. He just finished up his third novella, huh?
Yeah. And so he, that's a great way to supplement your income when you're an author. I'm trying to tell Larry to do that too. I mean,
it'd probably work out really well for Larry.
It'd work well for Larry.
So, yeah.
It'd work well for Larry. So I don't know, man. We're just at this weird stage, and I don't know where it's all going to sort out. I think traditional publishing needs to decide what it wants to do, and it needs to learn some lessons from indie and implement them.
Yeah, I mean, we shall see where things go for sure.
Yeah.
I do have a question for you, actually, real quick.
Yeah.
I probably maybe have a couple still, but we're getting close to 2 hours. But how did you meet Larry? I don't know if I've heard this story before.
Yeah. So I met Larry back in like 2008, 2009.
A while ago. Okay.
Something like that. So I was running Elitist Book Reviews.
Okay, yeah.
And I started Elitist Book Reviews completely selfishly. The idea was, so I'd gone to a few different science fiction fantasy conventions. And I noticed that when people went up to approach editors and authors and agents, and they were like, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I want to be an author." All those people, all the editors and stuff, like they hear that 1,000 times a day.
Right. Here's my idea.
So, yeah. And so I was like, I don't know about this. So I conceived of this idea to come up with a way to approach them better in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started Elitist Book Reviews back in 2005 or 6, something like that.
I didn't realize it was that old.
Yeah, it's been going for a while. I think we're like at 15 years now or something. Or they're at 15 years. I'm not part of that anymore. But what I found is I could approach, and this is how I met Pyre and how I met Joel Shepard, because he was at this convention. I approached him and I was like, "Hey, I'm Steve," and they're like, "Oh, great, here we go." I said, "I'm a book reviewer. I would like to review your book." And that became a very easy way to break the ice. And no author is ever going to say like no to a book reviewer. No That's publisher fair. Ever will either. So it became really easy. And my thought was, okay, I'm going to do this, and this will help me meet authors, meet editors, meet agents, meet publishers. And then when I do have something done, they already know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly how it worked out. So I went through, I did this for years and years and years. And one of the things I did is I always tried to read all the local authors here in Utah.
Mm.
And so one of the ones I ended up reading was this guy named Larry Correia. He had one book out. I'm like, okay, whatever. So I went to the library, I checked it out. I read it and I loved it. I'm like, wow, this is really fun. This is different. I mean, this is totally different than everything else that's out there right now. And then I saw that he was at one of the local conventions. It might have been LTUE back when it was at UVU University, because it used to be over there. And so I went there and I interviewed him there just for the site and stuff, because I'd already reviewed the book and gave it a stellar review. And then we ended up at the same dinner that night. There's like 15 or 20 of us that went to this Italian place down in the down that Provo Mall, not Provo Mall, the University Mall.
Mm-hmm.
We went to Carrabba's, you know the area. So we went there. We were at dinner, and he and I ended up sitting next to each other, and we were just chatting. And I'm like, and he's like, "Hey, well, what do you do?" He's like, "Oh," I said, "Oh, I'm an accountant." He goes, "Dude, I'm an accountant." And so we kind of hit it off right away, and we just ended up chatting that whole dinner. And then we kept in touch, and I mean, it was pretty sporadic. And then I was in a role-playing game group with a couple other people, with another author named Dan Wells. And Dan was like, he's like, "Hey, I was just at this convention and was talking to this guy named Larry Correia, who you know, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know him. He's great." He's like, "Yeah, he wants to join our group." I'm like, "Let him join. Let's do this." And so that was really it. I mean, we ended up being in a role-playing game group for, better part of a decade together.
Nice.
And so, so that was like 2008. And then right around that time, early 2009, I got my first short story sale to a guy named Paul Janess, who's another local guy. And I was all excited, and I told Larry about it. And I said, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool if at some point, you could write like an opposing character or something in the same little world that I just started over here?" He's like, "Yeah, that'd be fun." Well, a few months later, we were at a convention together, and he and I went to go get some food. And Paul stopped us and was like, "Hey, Larry, do you have your story done yet?" And Larry's like, "No, I don't yet, but don't worry. I already know what it's going to be about. It's all good. I'm actually going to co-write it with Steve right there." Well, that was the first I'd heard of that. And so, so that was kind of how we started writing together. And then he was pretty sure he was going to retire and write full time. But in doing so, that would leave a vacancy at his day job. And so that company hired me to come in and learn from Larry and do government accounting, and then take over for him once he left. And so we worked together in the same office for about a year and a half. And during this whole time frame, so this is like 2008 to 2013, that dude became one of my best friends. And so, yeah, so I mean, we hang out all the time. Obviously we do the podcast together, we write together, we hang out together quite a bit, we shoot together a lot. So yeah, so that's how I met Larry. It was just kind of, I reviewed his book, I liked it, he was local, and then that's kind of I don't know, one of those everything happens for a reason sort of things. And so yeah, it's been great. So yeah, that's how I met him. Kind of wild.
Pretty cool. Yeah, no, that's cool. See, I didn't know any of that really, so now I know. That's pretty cool. I have not really gotten much of a chance at all to talk to Larry. He's always crowded. Any event I've been to that he's also been at. So
yeah,
which isn't surprising. He's pretty popular.
Yeah. Turns out he's sold a book or two.
Yeah, and that's how I first talked to you. Kind of was at FanX, right? And Larry's just getting swarmed, and you're standing next to Larry, and I was like, "Oh, I'll talk to this guy," because I was there to talk to. I mean, I was staying at Dave's place, right? So I was there to talk to Dave and Christopher and Aaron a little, right?
Yeah.
I guess Brian, Durfee or whatever, because
I
liked his YouTube channel and stuff like that.
Yeah, Durfee was there too. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was just like, I'll talk to this guy real quick. So said hi to Steve, and Steve's a cool guy to talk to. So.
Me, you, and Rocky ended up talking for quite a while. And then me, you, and Chris Husberg actually ended up talking for a while too.
Yeah. And I had read Husberg's stuff, so I was trying to find out what booth he was at, but he wasn't at a booth, and I was just like, oh, what the hell? So
yeah. I've known Chris Husberg for a long time too. He's a good dude. He was actually in one of my very first writing groups back before either of us were published years and years and years ago.
Oh wow, yeah.
Like 2006. Something like that.
Wow, that's a while ago.
I've known Chris for a long time.
Wow. Okay, but it's funny because that this is a little talking we did in at FanX led to one of I call it like one of the most uncharacteristically like not like me at all like Liam moments ever was at LTUE. The next time I saw you during that panel, and
Yeah.
I raised my hand to answer the question. I'm not on the panel.
Yeah. No, that was good though. I mean, because that was me, Butler, and
Is Marion?
Marion Harmon.
Yeah, Harmon. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the three of us on there. Yeah, that was strange. Yeah, Marion doesn't write that. That was a panel on sword and sorcery,
Yeah.
and like heroic fantasy and stuff. And I'm
Mhm.
like, yeah, Marion. I mean, Marion's cool. I like Marion, but he doesn't write that. He writes superhero stuff. And Dave was kind of like, Dave was acting like he'd never written in that genre before. I'm like, Dave, you're killing me, dude. But no, that was good. That was actually, it turned out to be a good panel.
It's probably one of my favorite ones there, besides your little horror one you did.
Yeah,
That
I
one
did that
night.
presentation again at
Yeah.
LibertyCon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was better at LibertyCon. I actually had like a slideshow and stuff.
Oh, nice.
Because I planned for it. But no, those were good stuff. That was good stuff. But yeah, so yeah, it's funny, right? Like that's how you can make some really cool connections at conventions. Like that's how I met Larry. Howard Jones. That's how I met Howard.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
Was it Gen Con? We just ended up, I was moderating, I think like a dozen panels or something that year. And
you always moderate, it seems.
I always do. Even if it's not initially planned, I end up moderating.
God bless you, because man,
I hate it so much.
Yeah, I've only been to a couple cons, and like I'm kind of sick of panels sometimes, and I'm like, what the heck? Like, imagine being on them.
Yeah, and so I was moderating. It was like my third or fourth or fifth panel, that opening day of Gen Con, and Howard had ended up being on almost all of them together.
Oh, cool.
And I really liked the way Howard spoke about things. And so after one of the panels, I just kind of looked at him, and he looked at me, and I'm like, hey, I like what you're saying. He's like, you're a really great moderator. I'm like, thank you. So we ended up just going and getting some food together afterwards.
Cool.
And chatting, and we became instant friends.
That's awesome.
And so yeah, that's it's always fun being with Howard. I love talking with that guy.
Yeah,
But that's how it works out. I mean, and that's why, especially for young authors, it's important when you go to conventions that you're not a tool. It's important. It's important to talk and make connections and be personable and stuff, because you never know. I mean, you never know how it's going to be.
Yeah, I felt out of my comfort zone. Like every time I'm just like, hey, Steve, I know I'm just some random person, but what's up?
No, but that's what you got to do. That's what you got to do. And you went about it the right way, right? Like, I mean, that's, if you're obnoxious, it can really be a detriment, or if you act like a know-it-all. I've seen a lot of young authors do that. I've seen a lot of established authors do that. And so you get a lot more mileage out of kindness and friendliness. As a new author, as an existing author, you get a lot more mileage out of that than, just being a tool. And, and so it's, I mean, if I look back, to 2008 or wherever it was when I met Larry, I mean, I could never have imagined at that point in time that dude would end up becoming one of my closest friends, and our families are friends and all that. But, and writing with him, hosting a podcast with him, basically being in business with him, like, you never know how this is going to go. And so, just be cool. That's kind of my motto, and that's Larry's motto. It's be cool.
Just be cool. Yeah, I know it works. like I mean, it's really cool because I've only really been in Utah for like conferences so far, and though I'm like kind of sort of invited to one in Chicago in November, that's like really confusing me. I need to figure that out. But
Wait, what time of year?
it's in November.
Bring
It's
coat. Yikes.
yes, yeah. I'm from Illinois actually, so I mean, yeah,
Oh,
but
so you know.
yeah. So, but we'll see if that even happens because that's like Dave was showing me actually. My name was on the website,
Oh,
but the
that's
guy
great.
has never responded to any of my emails. I'm like, dude, and Christopher recommended me to him. So I mean, like, and I'm just like,
Huh.
what is going on here? But I'm on his website. It's my name, but it has like me as like a Simon and Schuster editor or something like that. I'm like, that's not me. So like, but we'll see how that goes. But I mean, it was really cool though because a lot of these Utah people are very polite and very cool. I mean, like you, and then I mean, Dave freaking invited me to his house, right? I'm
Yep.
just like, what the heck? Like, I don't even know you. Like, so,
Yeah.
but thanks, I'm coming. So like,
Yeah.
right, or even Christopher is just very chill guy. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know, people who are like that, we also tend to be friends. Me, Larry, Dave, Chris, all these guys, we're all friends.
mhm.
Durfee, like we're all buddies. And so um, once you start becoming friends with those sorts of people, you're rarely just friends with one of them. You start becoming friends and acquaintances and all that stuff with all of them. And then they have other little circles and stuff. And so, you know, that's the most important part of these conferences is it's the networking
Mhm.
aspect of it. And so yeah, I mean, but yeah, that's how I met Larry. That's how that came through. Um I'm glad I wasn't a tool.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I probably need to get off my butt and go to at least one day Fanix this year, but we shall see.
Fanix is different. That's a very
Yeah,
different sort of con.
it is very large and crowded. And
Well,
smoky,
and
but
it's not really focused on authors or
yeah,
anything like that anymore. I mean, you'd be better served saving up and going to like Liberty Con or something next year.
yeah.
Something like that.
I'm trying to get like an actual job because I just graduated.
Oh,
But I'm
okay.
starting my MA here in a couple weeks, so maybe that's a
Oh,
mistake.
yeah.
But I just graduated and I'm like looking for work, so I won't be like broke all the time.
Yep.
And so and I have and I have a third child that's coming also in a few months. So I'm just like I'm screwing myself, but so it's just like, but it's good stuff, right? I mean, so um, we'll see how it all goes. And I mean, I guess so for people watching, then there's some advice for you if you want to, go to cons, local, start local or at least
Yeah.
semi-local, right? Because I mean, I'm 3.5 hours from like all the stuff in Utah, but that's pretty close, all things considered. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, find what your local conventions are. It's not cheap, right? Like unless you're local, um, going out of state to a convention is expensive
mhm.
because there's hotel, there's food, there's travel, all that.
Yeah,
But yeah, if you can find some, in most states, most metropolitan areas have some local convention. Go there, meet the people, you know, um, make some connections. Um, you know, and if you can't do that, I mean, go sign up, go listen to like mine and Larry's podcast,
yeah,
and become part of that community. We have a couple thousand people in our
right,
Facebook
yeah.
group.
Or start a YouTube channel like I did.
I mean, there's
Which
so many different ways, right? I mean, there's so many different ways to skin this cat now.
right, yeah.
And so,
I mean,
and they all work and none of them are wrong.
yeah. And having your eggs in several baskets, doesn't really hurt. I
No.
guess, right? Like, I didn't start this channel for like anyone else besides myself, but but it's helped. I got Steve Diamond on the channel right now.
Woo!
So and it's just I've gotten other people on the channel, and I get free books sometimes. Heck, Howard sent me a copy of Lord of the Shattered Land.
Oh, good. Good.
So that was awesome. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, if you want to be an author, you've got to make connections. That's just the way
Hmm.
it is.
That's just the way the world
Yeah.
is. And if those connections end up becoming like really good friends, then great. If they just open a right door for you, great. Like, you never know. I mean, that's how I met Tony Weisskopf. I was friends with Larry. I was at a convention, and this lady comes over and just sits down next to us and starts talking. And I have no idea who she is. I'm like,
Yeah.
who's this lady coming and, interrupting mine and Larry's conversation? Like, that's weird. But Larry wasn't saying anything. I'm like,
Oh,
like, because, normally if it was just some rando, he would have said something.
Yeah.
But he didn't say anything. And then, after a few minutes, he goes, "Oh, by the way, Tony, this is Steve. He runs Elitist Book Reviews." And she goes, "Oh yeah, of course. I know who you are, Steve." She's like, "I'm Tony Weisskopf." And then it clicked in my head and I went, "Oh, probably a
Yeah.
good thing I wasn't a jerk."
Yeah, right, exactly. I need to meet
And
Tony. Yeah.
and that single conversation ended up kind of forming the foundation, so to speak, or starting me down the road to knowing her, so that she felt comfortable with me writing short stories for Bain and obviously writing novels for him too. So
Yeah.
you just never know. You just never know.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but yeah. So that was a really, really long answer for how did you meet Larry, Steve?
Yes. But it answered my other questions too, actually. But
Yeah.
It's funny, yeah. I mean, the people that was like come up at these things, because like that's how, I mean, we talked to Dan Wells actually at LTUE when you were there, right?
Okay.
If I'm remembering correctly, and
Sounds
he was
right.
there with his daughter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
We
and
were
I
all
was
on the
like,
couches.
I'm
Yeah,
like,
we
I
were
don't
in-
know who the heck this guy is. Like,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah,
so that was an interesting conversation. He probably doesn't remember who I am, but
well,
I let his daughter take my seat. I remember that, but
like with Dan, I met Dan because he was friends with Brandon, and we went to a convention together. And Brandon Sanderson basically forced me to go to this convention in 2006, and I was like, "Fine, I'll go." So I went with him, and he's like, "Dude, he's like, just stay in the same room as me." This is before Brandon had, Kickstarter money, obviously.
Yeah.
There were 4 of us all sharing the same room together.
Nice.
So, and one of the other guys in the room was Dan. And this is before he published anything. And so he and I ended up taking one side of the room, and Brandon and a guy named Bob Defendi took the other side. And so Dan and I ended up hanging out. We were walking to lunch at one point, and he made a joke in Spanish, and I laughed at it, and I was the only one there that understood it. And he looks at me and he goes, "Wait, do you speak Spanish?" I said, "Yeah. I served a mission in Mexico." He's like, "Me too." And so we became friends immediately after that. And so he and I have been friends ever since, closing in on, almost 20 years now, I guess. So
Man, you're getting old, I guess, Steve.
I know I am. I feel it too. So again, me going to that convention, would I have thought that would have spawned me knowing Dan Wells and becoming friends with him? No, but that's how it was. That's how it worked. So you just never know. But if you're a jerk to people, you're never gonna know.
Yeah.
So
be kind, right? That's a good maxim to live by. It's a pretty simple one.
Yep. Well, and one of the other things I do is when I'm on panels and stuff, and I'm frequently on a lot of panels. I try not to talk about myself, if that makes any sense.
Happens a lot, but yeah, that makes sense.
I if I'm asked a direct question like, "Steve, in Servants of War, you did this. How do you do that?" Okay, well, yeah, I'll answer the question. Or, "Steve, how do you, in your books, how do you implement horror in your books?" or whatever. I'll answer the question. But if it's just a general question like, "Hey, Steve, where did you learn how to do horror from?" I talk about the influences on me. I don't talk about me.
There's a lot of authors that they'll make every little thing. They'll drop back to some book, usually one that's sitting in front of them. And they'll say, oh, well, I do that like this in this book and that's very, very self-serving and not in the good way. I found that, look, it's easy to sell a book. It's easy. You know, if I'm standing in a booth at FanX and random people come by, it's very easy for me to sell a book. In fact, and I do, and that's why I was in that booth. That's why I've been in that booth for, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, something like that. Because no matter how many books I bring, I sell out.
Nice.
And that's great. And it's easy to sell a book. But what I would rather do is sell me as the person. Because if the casual person walks by and becomes a fan of me, not my books, of me, then they'll buy any book that I have.
Right.
And they'll continue to buy those books as long as they're of good quality. That's my job. My job is to make sure the quality is good.
Yeah.
My job is to entertain. If I entertain and I'm not a jerk face about things, then I'm much more likely to sell future books to the same person. And that's important. And so part of that is being on panels where I'm not everything is about whatever the book is in front of me.
Yeah.
And so that's, for any up and coming authors who end up on panels, that's pretty important. And for more well-known authors, maybe you should start thinking about that too. It's pretty frustrating when you're an author to be on a panel with someone else and every stupid reference that they make is, oh, well, in this book of mine right here, I did this thing right here like that. And I mean,
it's frustrating even in the audience, at least for me. Like, I find it annoying personally. So, I mean, like, half the time I go to panels, I come away annoyed with half the panelists. And I'm like, well, I'm not interested in your books. Like, so
it is.
So yes, I agree with what Steve is saying. In fact, I didn't read any of Steve's books until I met Steve. So
yeah.
So
and it's and here's the other thing. If they become a fan of you as an author, they are much more likely to forgive the shortcomings that are within your story. Because none of us are going to write perfect stories. It's just not going to happen. Like I'm not Matheson writing I Am Legend, right? Like I'm not going to write the perfect story. I'm just not. I'm not Dan Simmons writing Carrying Comfort, right? Like, or I haven't written the Malasm Book of the Fallen like Erickson did, or Black Company like Cook. Like, you can't expect that you're going to be the best of the best. The best you can hope for is that you do good enough to entertain and that people like your stuff. But so if my stuff isn't perfect, and it's definitely not, if it's not perfect, then how do I get them to forgive the imperfections? Well, if they like you as an author, they're much more likely to forgive those imperfections. I mean, like Brandon, right? Like Brandon Sanderson, his stuff isn't perfect. Some of his stuff I really like. Some of it I don't. That's just the nature of being a reader.
Right.
But Brandon treats his fans like gold. He treats them as well as any author truly can. And because of that, they will forgive any of his imperfections. And they do.
Yeah.
They do. Right? This is like scientific. It's not an opinion. We see examples of this all the time.
So, you know, that's how it works.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I didn't read Empire of Silence until after I talked, with Christopher on Discord a few
Same.
times. So it's like,
yeah,
it sounds like this guy's pretty cool. His book's probably fine, I guess.
yeah, I didn't, I'd met Christopher and talked with him over the course of a couple of years before I read Empire of Silence. And then when I started reading it, I'm like, oh, this is not what I expected. It's great. It's awesome. It's totally not what I was expecting out of a science fiction novel in the best ways possible.
Yeah.
And are there imperfections in Empire of Silence? Yes. Yes, there are. But it doesn't matter, because overall, the book is awesome. And Chris is awesome.
It is. Yes.
And so that's all that matters. And so if I can make sure that other people feel that way towards me, like how I feel towards, say, Chris or Erickson or Butch or whoever, then I've done something right. So
that's fair.
There you go. There's your author philosophy for the day.
Hey, author philosophy. It's more interesting than like Kant, I can say that. Anyways, anyways, we should probably wrap up here. It's been a little over 2 hours here.
Probably.
I guess I just want to say thanks real quick, and then just if you just want to give, I know it's the end of the video, so I mean, I don't know if my channel is not super popular, but if you're watching this right now, Steve, if you just want to give again like a rundown of where you can be found or what books people can read by you or whatever. So
yeah, so the easiest spot to find me is at my website, authorstevediamond.com, or you can find me at writerdojo.com. Either of those two places are probably the easiest. I'm on all the social medias. I'm on the Twitters and the Facebooks and stuff. Not that I like any of those two things, but I'm there if you need me. And then, yeah, as far as books go, I mean, I have kind of a little bit of everything right now. I mean, I've got a short story collection called What Hellhounds Dream. I've got epic fantasy with my buddy Larry Correia called Servants of War. Supernatural thrillers and horror with Residue and the sequels. And then now I've even got some just some straight up techno thrillers with Mike Rothman, and that's new Arcadia. And some sword and sorcery coming soon, and hopefully some science fiction coming soon too. So we're all getting there. It's all there. Any of those things are good.
Yes, I agree. No, sweet. I will definitely be reading more of your work, Steve. But
you better.
Yeah, I better. You read my one short story, so
it was good too, dude. It was really good. You should be proud of that story.
Thanks. Yeah. I have to remind myself to be proud of something.
Always.
Yeah. So, anyways, I'm going to try to link all that stuff down below as well in this video. So, I will remind myself. Anyways, thanks for coming on again, Steve.
Anytime, man.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just end this now. So peace to everyone watching.